A lot of planning's gone into this build. Mick has been drawing quite a lot of detailed designs, and one of the things he did last week was spend quite a significant amount of time planning the electrical cabinet, which is going to be just here. It's going to house the battery, a fuse box, a couple of kill switches, solar controller, control panel. Is that everything? And the VSR, the voltage sensitive relay, which connects the engine battery to the leisure battery. And the intention was that the diesel heater would then sit in the next compartment along under the bed sofa. Now, all this planning is all very well, but there's a very steep learning curve in building a van for the first time, and it seems that each time we plan something, when we actually come to build it, we find what the issues are with what we thought was a good plan. And obviously we're putting a lot of thought in and trying to make sure that we considered all these issues, but there are things that we miss. So we received the diesel heater a couple of days ago, and that was the trigger to really start to measure and confirm that it would fit where we wanted it to fit. So that involved me crawling round under Erica again and established that where I thought we would be able to fit the exhaust air intake and fuel pipe through the floor, it really is very tight, and we'd be having to cut away part of a cross support that I don't think is an important one because it was put in relation to the rear seats that we have now taken out, but it would make it a lot harder to drill through the floor. So my latest investigations have decided that the only place the diesel heater can go is where I've got that circle on the floor there. That is the size of the turret mount. So that means that there's not a lot of room in the electrical compartment. We're going to have to put some insulation here because we don't want the battery getting too hot from the heater. By all accounts, the casing of the heater doesn't get too hot, but we're going to be running, of course, the heating duct, and that does get very hot. So we want to try and keep that heat out of the battery compartment. The time has come to drill a big hole through the floor for the diesel heater. That is the diesel heater, and that goes onto a mounting plate. It comes with a mounting plate, but we have bought a turret mount, which obviously raises it from the bottom of the vehicle because we are going through a wooden floor before we go through the metal floor. That is 125mm across that circle. And so I have here a 127mm hole saw that we're going to be drilling a hole just there. I've just marked the middle of it, so I'm now going to drill a hole down through the middle, go back underneath, make sure that all our measurements are right before we go for it with the big hole saw. That was quick and easy. Drilling the big hole won't be. I've just demonstrated the value in drilling a little test hole first, because I went underneath and said, my God, that is not in the right place. Because it turns out the chassis runs lengthwise under here, and in one of my measurements I've mistaken the edge of that for the edge of the trough, and therefore mismeasured, and that's quite a way away from where we wanted it to be. So this is going to be pilot hole number 2. That is a very large hole in the floor. That is what we've just drilled out. That took it was a long, slow job. You can't go very fast with a hole saw of that size. So it was just a long old time of holding the drill and trying not to break our wrists when it caught on something and kicked back. I was in two minds whether to buy the hole saw for this job or whether to go with a circle of small holes and a jigsaw. Obviously I opted to spend the money on the hole saw, partly because I already had the arbor, so it was only the actual hole saw itself that I needed to buy. And I can say, having done that, that I hope I never have to use that item again. It's not a pleasant experience cutting a hole like that. And what I might be able to show you here, the criticality of the placing of the hole. Just here, literally, I would say 3 or 4 mil that way, we have got a cross piece. Wouldn't have actually been a disaster if we'd cut into that one, and just here there is, you can see, another cross piece. We've got quite a bit of margin for error there. In that direction we're almost up against, in fact we're probably about 3mm away from the lip of the chassis member, and we had loads of room in that direction, except for in order to keep the air intake for the circulating air far enough away from the door, we really needed it as far inwards as possible. And the vital question is, did we go through straight enough for the turret to fit in? The turret is actually 2mm smaller in diameter of the circle than the hole we've drilled, and yet that fits in. So that is a bonus. Right, we're going to call it a day there. So let's see what we've got here. We've got the heater itself. It works via sucking air and fuel into a combustion chamber, does a combustion bit, chucks out exhaust gases. That all happens in the combustion chamber and using these connections which go immediately to outside the vehicle. For inside the vehicle, it sucks air in here, there's a fan, it throws that air over a heat exchanger, chucks it out here. That heater is going to sit on this mounting plate. Just stepping through the other items that have been provided, that piece of tube there goes on the front of the heater to send the heat from wherever you've mounted it out into where you want the heat. So in our case, there's just going to be a very short distance that goes from under the seat via this vent to come out the front of the sofa. We've got an air intake pipe which is for the combustion side, and we've got an exhaust pipe for the combustion side, and there's also a silencer box to go on the exhaust. There's an electronic controller. That is the air filter for the combustion air intake. There's a fuel pump and a bit of rubber that sits around the fuel pump to dampen its ticking. Apparently the fuel pumps can be really quite noisy. And then we've got some fuel line and the connector pieces, so the fuel line everywhere that you need to make a connection gets clamped into these fuel pipes. And there's a wiring harness and a bag of Jubilee clips and fittings. And then there's some instructions. I'm imagining that it's not written in the best English ever. It also comes with a 10-litre fuel tank. We won't be using that, we'll be buying a 5-litre container to take the place of that. Just taken the top off this to have a look inside. As I mentioned before, heat exchanger, combustion chamber in there. This is the fan that blows the air over the heat exchanger. That's the electronics, the motherboard's in there, and that'll be the glow plug. There's really not an awful lot more to it. First thing to do, to attach the heater to the plate. And at this point, we have been thwarted. I knew that the quality of the Jubilee clips that come with these are highly questionable, and I had read advice that I should buy some different ones, but I thought I'd see whether these would do the job. And the answer is that, having tried to tighten this one, it's got so far and it is now just turning without tightening, but this is not tight enough. As you can see, I can still turn it. So we need to get some genuine proper Jubilee clips that will do the job properly. And until we have those, what we have is a lot of heater over the dining room table and no more work can proceed. It's felt like a bit of a comedy of errors getting all the pieces fitted to this diesel heater this morning. There was the whole trial of finding a tool that would fit into the turret to tighten up the Jubilee clips in there. Then we came to fit the silencer and found that the exhaust tube is smaller than the bit of the silencer that it needs to fit over. So rather than resorting to splitting it, I thought I would try and apply some heat first, which revealed that my blowtorch is not where my blowtorch was meant to be. So I had to go and dig a spare out of the shed, then couldn't find the heat-proof glove, then found that the gas was empty and had to go and find a new gas canister. So all in all, that very quick job has taken rather a long time, but it is now all together, and hopefully slotting it all through that hole in the floor will prove to be a lot more straightforward than the assembly, and I'm very glad I was not doing that assembly whilst lying under the vehicle. Never mind today's rain, that would have been very swear-inducing. We have, of course, applied a couple of coats of hammerite to the raw edges of the metal and some varnish to the edges of the wood, so hopefully there won't be any moisture doing untoward things in there. We will also be sealing the bottom of the turret as well. It looks so innocently neat there that it's hard to believe that it's caused such a fight this morning, albeit most of the fight was actually searching for tools that I should have known the whereabouts of. And that is the underneath. Need to get some sealant now to seal that in, screw it down, and then I just need to do something with the bits that are now hanging down. I've said this before and I'll say it again, I'll be very happy when I no longer have to find myself lying and rolling around under this vehicle. The immediate task, you can see in front of my head, that is the silver tube there is the exhaust for the heater. The black tube with the black bobbly thing on the end is the air intake for the heater. And I don't know if I can move so you can see. There's also a coil of piping there. That is the fuel pipe. So I now need to do something with those. First thing I'm going to do is uncoil the fuel pipe and feed it up through one of the old seat bolt holes in the floor, and then I might just stop for coffee because it's just started raining and my legs are getting wet.
This is the spreader plate that held the nuts that were behind those seat mounting points. In coming to feed the fuel pipe up through one of those nuts, I came to realise the plate was moving and was held by only one rivet. We didn't want any movement to chafe the fuel pipe, so given the options between gluing it or removing it, we decided to remove. With the faffing and the doing, an hour has been lost in removing the rivet, and I'm not sure my shoulders are going to forgive me any time soon for the effort I've gone through lying in underneath drilling it out. And if we'd known that the spreader plate would come out with a mere hour's effort, we could have done it earlier and could have placed the heater hole just where we originally wanted it. But no point crying over spilt milk. The hole is now where it is.
And if I can just indulge myself with a little bit of whinging, it's raining. It's been raining whilst I've been lying under the vehicle. Mick's been standing in the rain. I've now got a wet back. I've got wet legs. It's wet.
What to do when you haven't got enough room under your vehicle to get a full-size cartridge gun in to put some sealant around your turret mount to make sure that no moisture gets in? My answer was a piping bag with a piping nozzle on the end, which worked an absolute treat.
We started work on the heater at about 10:30 this morning, before which we'd already made a little bit of a modification to the bed frame. The modification we made to the bed, previously there was a single piece of wood that ran the whole length there. What we did this morning was to just chop out that section there. That support already existed and we just put a support in there. Didn't take us very long to do that, and as you can see it now just nicely goes around the heater. So we did that and then we started on the heater. That was 7 hours ago, so it feels like we spent an absolutely inordinate length of time working on this heater today. But the reality is it's been a really rainy day, so I've just been snatching 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there when it's not been raining too badly, or in the rare times when it's actually stopped. So whilst it feels like it's been all day, it probably actually hasn't added up to that much time. And a lot of the time that has been spent has been once again on the learning curve. If I was to start a new install of this heater now, I would certainly do it a lot faster. And there was the hour that was spent drilling out a rivet. So I will show you underneath Erica and show what has happened under there today.
That bit of foam is where I spent my time outside lying today. It's quite comfy lying on that. Unfortunately, in the rain, it also, of course, all the rain pools on top of it, so I've spent most of the day feeling decidedly damp, particularly on my back. So if I just put the light on my camera, this here, obviously, is the vehicle exhaust. This is the heater exhaust.
One of the things I learnt today is that heater exhaust is actually really tricky to bend. In fact, contrary to my statements yesterday that I'm glad I didn't have to do all those connections up there with the turret in situ, I did in fact take the exhaust back off today and bend it out of place. And it turns out I've got some sockets that are a lot better for that job than any that I found yesterday. So with those sockets, that wasn't too difficult a job. So as I say, that's the exhaust. This is the fuel pipe. I don't know if you can see up there, if I can get the camera in the right position. There we go. There's a little bit of ducting going through the floor. It's all still loose above, so that will actually go tighter up there. But yeah, that's the ducting going through the original bolt hole from the seat. And then this black pipe here, going across there, is the air intake. And I've got that hopefully tucked up the way so it's not going to be sucking in any moisture or rain, and I've got that secured with cable ties to a metal part of the sheathing for the handbrake, and then it's also attached to a cross support there. So I'm actually quite pleased with how that's all looking. The only thing is, the exhaust that came with the heater is 60 centimetres long, and I could not get the silencer box onto the end without it clashing with the exhaust. The pipe wasn't long enough to get it past the exhaust, but it was too long to put the silencer this side. I did look at buying another exhaust pipe of a different length, which may yet do. But in the meantime, we thought, well, let's just try it without the silencer. Reports online suggest that actually that silencer doesn't make an awful lot of difference. And we do always, of course, have the option of just chucking it on there when we are using the heater, which probably won't be all that often. So, for the moment, it is silencerless. As I say, possible future mod to do something about that.
Don't be fooled by my selective editing of the fitting of the fuel tank outflow. Whilst the process isn't difficult, it is a bit fiddly, and it involved a lot more faffing than I've shown here.
I fear that I've not taken any video snippets of what we've been doing under here since we actually put the heater in. But what has happened since is that we have put in a fuel tank which is full of fuel. We've put in a couple of dividers, this one being insulated to keep the heat out of the battery compartment, and we've put in the battery which is all tied down. We've attached the pump to the wall, although we acknowledge that is probably going to have to come back off and be suspended by cable tie to quieten it down. And my rather inelegant solution to needing the switch for the heater to be out of reach, because it's very important that you don't turn these heaters off accidentally. They have to go through a shutdown cycle. I just grabbed a Patras box because it happens to have the right size hole and it holds it out from the wall, just to mount the switch conveniently. The electrical setup here is that off the heater is a connector block, and it comes with the wiring harness that I showed earlier on. From there we've got a negative going over to the battery. We've got a positive going via a fuse, and that comes into the switch. From that switch goes back to that connector. Out of there comes another wire which comes to the controller, and there's also a wire which goes to the pump. And what we're about to do now is turn the power on and see if we can fire this up. I've not yet connected an earth to this switch, so the light isn't going to come on when I turn it on. That's on. And that is the controller telling me that it's set to 2.4 Hz, I assume. And I have no idea what that red light is at the bottom. Mick, what do I have to do next? I wasn't recording, but we have just primed the fuel line, and the fan has sprung into life. We've turned it on, the fan has sprung into life, and now we're just waiting to see what happens. It's not many seconds later, what you can now hear is the ticking of the fuel pump, sound of the exhaust. And out of this outlet by my foot here, we have warm air. Blimey. Oh, and it's just cranking itself up. The fan has just increased in speed. So it's seemingly successfully gone through its startup. That's really cranked up now. It's now sounding a bit like a jet engine about to take off. And my hand is getting quite warm down here. We've run it a few minutes on high. All seems to be working. So we've just turned it down to its lowest setting, where it's
a lot quieter.
A lot quieter. As I'd expected, the most intrusive thing is the tick and vibration of the fuel pump, which hopefully we can lessen by suspending it rather than firmly fixing it. But the actual noise of the fan at this point, I would say, is perfectly acceptable, and the noise of the exhaust, even without the silencer from where I'm sitting inside, it's fine. I've just waxed the heater up to 3, which is its maximum, 3 hertz. So the fan has ramped back up, the pump has ramped back up, but we can barely hear any of that because at the moment there is rain hammering down. Now we just need to read to find out how we switch it off. I've put it into shut-off mode, so the glow plug light has come back on so it can burn off any unused fuel, and we can see the temperature of the combustion chamber is dropping, which is exactly what we need, because if you just turn these off without running through this cycle, the excess temperature within the box will melt things that you don't want to melt, like the motherboard that's in there. I'll just finish this video with a few comments that I should have made right at the outset, starting with the fact that what you've just watched us fit is a cheap Chinese diesel heater. When I started researching heaters, I initially looked at the big German brands Webasto and Eberspacher and immediately discounted those based on price. I did think that we might go for a planar heater, but again they're quite expensive compared to the Chinese rip-offs. So I joined a couple of Facebook groups on the subject of diesel heaters, followed them for many months, and was thus persuaded that the best value for money was the Chinese version. So what you've just seen us fit came in at just under £99, although on top of that we did buy the turret mount, a different fuel canister, some little bits and pieces that added up on top. Only time will tell whether that proved to be a good choice, whether it's reliable, but hopefully it will be reliable, it will serve us well, and hopefully we'll be nice and toasty and warm if we should go away in winter. And that is what we were trying to achieve.